Senator Smith, you are now in order for opening remarks on 2486. Amendment 4071.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Amendment 4071. This bill takes into consideration the recent district court decision in the case of LULAC against the Secretary of State. Judge Joseph Seblin upheld our voter ID law and argued that the state has an interest in ensuring the integrity of all elections in this state. This bill implements those practices and ensure Iowa registered voters continue to have safe, secure, and reliable elections. This concludes my opening remarks. There is an amendment to the amendment.
There is an amendment, and that is 4071. Yes, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask you for a ruling on the germaneness of this amendment, and I'm going to give you some of my reasons why I'm asking you for this ruling. First of all, this amendment is to a House bill that was quite frankly, a very easy, simple bill that was changing nothing more than the county seal that would be on a ballot. So we now go from a 9-line bill to a 30-page bill that, in my humble opinion, is once again suppressing the vote and has nothing to do with the original intent of the bill that we received from the House of Representatives, by the way, on a unanimous vote. Second, I have heard more than once that somehow everything is germane in a committee. Not true. So let me go back to Senate Rule 3, Rules of Parliamentary Procedure. In cases not covered by Senate rules or joint rules, Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure shall govern. Mason's Manual, Section 402, amendments must be germane. Every amendment proposed must be germane to the subject of the proposition or to the section or paragraph to be amended. Second, to determine whether an amendment is germane, the question to be answered is whether the amendment is relevant, appropriate, and in a natural and logical sequence to the subject matter of the original proposal. Mr. Chairman, the amendment before us is not subject matter of the original proposal. I ask for a ruling on the germaneness.
Thank you, Senator Jochum. Okay, yep, so this interesting stuff here. Section 616 of Mason's Legislative Manual states that a committee may properly propose any amendments within the general scope of the bill. In addition, Senate Rule 12, discussing whether or not an amendment is germane, clearly applies to floor debate and not debate in committee. Finally, the purpose of the committee process is to perfect legislation, including robustly considering amendments without limitations that exist in floor debate rules. The bill deals with the printing of ballots in the same chapter of the Iowa Code dealing with the method of conducting elections. Therefore, this amendment on conducting elections is relevant and appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, I disagree with you full-heartedly. This amendment has nothing to do with the original intent of the bill that came from the House. Thank you.
That is Senator Smith. I recognize Senator Smith for opening comments on Amendment 4138.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amendment 4138. This amendment allows for county hospital trustees and township trustees to file for nomination for 2020 general election no later than 69 days before the election. This concludes my opening remarks on Amendment 4138.
Is there any discussion on Amendment 4138? Seeing none, Senator Smith, you're in order for closing remarks on Amendment 4138.
I move amendment.
Wait. Is there someone? Senate Democrats will go to caucus. Where are these? Okay. State government back in. Okay, state government's back in order. You asked for some more discussion, Senator Bisignano, on Amendment 4138. Senator Smith, you're in order.
Oh, it's discussion of Amendment 4138.
Yeah, this is, yes, discussion on 4138.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion on Amendment 4138? Seeing none, Senator Smith, you're in order for closing comments on 4138.
I move Amendment 4138.
Senator Smith, oh, yes, here, yes. You're ready. Huh? Okay. Senator Smith so I'm moving the bill, or the amendment. Senator Smith moves Amendment 4138. Ask for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Amendment 4138 moves. So now am I back on? Senator Taylor, okay. Yep. Jeepers. Okay, so now we're going to be on Amendment 4071.4162 with Senator Taylor. Senator Taylor, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment before us it'll offer a minority impact statement so that beginning next year, January 1, 2021, a minority impact statement shall be attached to each bill or joint resolution prior to debate on the floor. And you can read the importance of why that would be, because it's going to impact minority persons, disabled persons, women in the state, including but not limited to the impact of economic opportunities, employment, incarceration, educational opportunities, housing opportunities, voter rights, voting access, and other relevant matters. The statement will be factual, and it shall, if possible, provide a reasonable estimate of both the immediate impact and the long-range impact upon minority persons, disabled persons, and women. The Legislative Services Agency shall develop the protocol for analyzing the impact of this legislation on minority persons, disabled persons, and women pursuant to this section. The Legislative Services Agency shall cause to be prepared a minority impact statement within a reasonable time after the bill or joint resolution is placed on the calendar. So much like we have, whenever we enact a tax cut, we have a fiscal note. So it guides the legislature in what that budget impact will be. Any piece of legislation that is going to affect women or minorities or disabled persons, the list that we cite here, we need to have an impact statement to understand and guide the legislature into how we will proceed forward. So this amendment is attached to an amendment dealing with access to the polls or changes to voting rules. So one of the things that we would want with this amendment is to have an analysis done of how that would adversely affect or how it would affect, and then we can determine how adverse that is to a population that we've defined. So it is a minority impact statement that guides the legislature in moving forward. There's people out marching in the streets right now, and a lot of them are minorities, not all of them, but we're going to pass legislation that could possibly change their access to the polls, and I would like this body to have the understanding of what that's going to do, so we have an analysis done, an independent, nonpartisan analysis done, and that's why, really, Mr. Chair, that I offer this language tonight. Thank you.
Is there discussion on Amendment 4162? Senator Smith, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for offering this amendment. I am willing to work with you on this amendment. I do want to recognize that this better vehicle will be in the future. This amendment and what you said about the amendment that you're amending here, nothing in here stops someone from going to the polls. So I want to reiterate that for what that you said in your opening remarks. So I would encourage my colleagues to not support this amendment.
Senator, seeing no other discussion, Senator Taylor, you're in order for closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a few of my colleagues were just making comments that maybe you couldn't hear, that in this room, in this process, it's a little bit difficult to hear. So Senator Smith, I heard you say that you would be willing to work with me on this, except for my argument that how this could impact someone having access to the polls, since that's not your intent with the other part of this bigger bill, that you should say no to this amendment. I would still argue, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, that we would need an impact statement to guide the legislature in making decisions that impact minority persons, disabled persons, women in the state, including but not limited to the impact of the economic opportunities, employment, incarceration, educational opportunities, housing opportunities, voter rights, voting access, and other relevant matters. So that right there is why I want to have, it doesn't matter what the elements of the other parts of your bill are relative to voting. I would like to have an independent analysis help us understand the impact for those communities and those populations in voting rights and voting access in particular, the other as I listed. That's why we wrote it that way, and this is important, so much so, Mr. Chair, I would ask for record roll call.
Record roll call has been asked for Amendment 4162. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Senator Smith?
No.
Senator Johnson?
No.
Senator Bisignano? Yes. Senator Celsi? Yes. Senator Chapman? No. Senator Giddings? Senator Jochum? Yes. Senator Miller-Meeks? Senator Rosenboom? Senator Schultz?
No.
Senator T. Taylor?
Yes.
Senator Whiting? Senator Zahn?
No.
4162 fails 10-5. Senator Smith, you are in order for Amendment 4138. Discussion on Amendment 4138. Is there discussion? Anyone? We're on 4071. Okay. I'm sorry. We are on Amendment 4071. Is there discussion? Yes, you're in order.
Strike after amendment to the amendment.
4071.
All right, so discussion on this?
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay. Thank you. That answers my point. I'd like to be recognized to speak on this.
Okay. Senator Taylor, you're in order.
Thank you. Okay. 4071, a 30-pager. Okay, so one of the things that we saw in the pandemic was the Secretary of State making some changes to how we handle elections. Page 1, line 11, Division 1, this amendment talks about that can still happen under Chapter 47, Sub 1, Subsection 2, but the natural disaster or the extremely inclement weather must occur within 21 days of the election. So COVID-19, doesn't operate on any kind of a calendar, and so if this were to be in effect, then that would be illegal for the Secretary of State to make that change. Maybe that's your intent. I certainly hope not, because the Republican Secretary of State made that call and was within the code section that he has rights to operate under. And the benefit of that was that people had access to voting, but they made changes to it. And, the people that we have around the state dealing with elections are county auditors. So I have a couple of letters here from the county auditors who saw this come forward today. And, I know it's 10 o'clock at night, but of course we talked at 1 o'clock this afternoon and said, hey, this bill's on the floor for 2 o'clock. So we scrambled to try to put some information together because, it's fun a week, and the 30-pager gets dropped on the last day. We saw this thing first thing this morning. But so I'd like to share some information about, from the president of ISAC on behalf of the ISAC Executive Board, who happens to be the auditor of Scott County. House File 2486 proposes some significant changes to Iowa law. And many of those changes seem to be in response to the steps taken by Secretary of State Paul Pate under his emergency authority to ensure that Iowa voters would be able to participate in the June 2nd primary without risking their health during the worldwide pandemic that has killed well over 500 Iowans. The changes would prevent the Secretary from implementing a number of these steps in future elections. And as an aside, as I just mentioned on page 1, line 11, within that the incident that the Secretary of State was responding to had to be within 21 days. So why would the state want to cripple that process that led to such success? It's a rhetorical question. County auditors as local commissioners of elections are baffled by this. In 2020, the 2020 primary was successful based on a variety of metrics, largely due to steps taken by the Secretary. Counties experienced record or near record turnout. Election day went very smoothly. Results were rapidly available. And I happen to see right now 2 of my colleagues right over there, and they're right next to each other, and they both won primaries for the Congress of the United States. And I think they partly did that, God bless you, and I'm congratulating you and your party. There was a partisan primary. That happened because of the actions of the Secretary of State. And I actually have statewide absentee ballot results for every county. And the thing what happened was the part of the order that the Secretary implemented was that you would send out absentee ballot request forms to everybody. So nobody was forced to vote by mail, but they were all invited to vote by mail. And these results and the results of the winners in the room tonight prove that people participated because they were at home under the pandemic and under orders. For example, let me continue here in this letter. Secretary Pate and his staff provided great leadership and assistance to the counties to deal with the hazards of COVID-19 and the pandemic in the conduct of an election. One of the most critical aspects of their assistance was to provide voters with an absentee ballot request forms, making it easier to vote from home at the time when Governor Reynolds was counseling Iowans not to leave their homes except for in absolute necessity. The large absentee turnout had the unexpected benefit of relieving many voters of making the decision whether or not to go to the polls in a time of civil unrest in their communities. I might also note that, continuing on, the voters came from all political persuasions. The ballots are processed, safeguarded, and counted by members of both major political parties. There is a health and safety issue, and there's not a political issue. So in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, our Secretary of State puts forward these executive authority, and he didn't do it within the 21 days. He gave us plenty of notice, and the results, I have some maybe some summaries of these results here. Let me back up actually a little bit. It's hard to believe on Friday night here that the primary was just a couple days ago. And this letter was sent from Secretary of State Paul Pate on Monday this week. Dear Senator Taylor, I wanted to keep you appraised of our plans to ensure Iowans can vote safely and securely in the June primary. Election directors are natural risk managers. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Polls will be open in every county from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Throughout today, my office has been in contact with county auditors, the Iowa Department of Public Safety, the Iowa Attorney General's Office, Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the FBI, and other agencies. We have a communication structure in place to coordinate quickly with all 99 counties in the variety of state and federal elections on Election Day. This is a commonplace practice on Election Day to help us monitor election-related activities and be prepared for cyber threats, misinformation, and other issues. County auditors are working with local law enforcement entities, and they have procedures and plans in place for preparing for a variety of scenarios. Due to the pandemic, auditors consolidated some polling places. This was done because of a lack of available sites and a lack of available poll workers. We do not anticipate significant lines at polling places because most voters appear to have chosen the absentee ballots option. However, we are taking precautions to reduce the risk of spread of COVID-19 at polling places. And that letter continues. I've just touched on 2 or 3 or 4 elements that are elements in this bill that we're taking away the ability of our elections statewide officials and our elections county officials to make adjustments necessary during the pandemic. Okay, for example, I mentioned the access to the absentee ballots. The consolidation of polling places. There's language in this bill that says that the consolidation has to fit certain guidelines, unless it can't be more than 35%. But the fact is, there may be some reason why we have to do that. We should give the elected official that authority to do that. It talks about the Secretary of State it modifies the methods for conducting elections for the federal offices. So if a federal office, such as the 2 winners that I mentioned tonight, were on the ballot, he would not be able to implement what he did. That doesn't make any sense to me. That worked. Just because there's a federal office on the ballot, that means we couldn't put it in suspension, or say we're going to handle it differently, or let the election process work its way through. Also, I spoke with some other folks, other county auditors, and they would sum this up as this is not the time to make significant changes in the conduct of elections. As you know, that we've experienced record voter turnout during this week. And so it seems like the vox populi, right? The voice of the people. The voice of the people is expressed in their votes. We want to give them access. We don't want to take access away. Every time we have a bill like this in state government committee, I ask myself, why are any of these pieces of legislation, any of these paragraphs in here, doing anything other than expanding access and opportunity for people to vote? I don't know. And what we see is a whole list of reasons. We can't let the Secretary of State automatically send out the absentee ballot request forms. You know, in neighboring Wisconsin, we saw them say, hey, because of the pandemic and because of the orders to stay home and the deadliness of this, then we don't want them to go out to vote. We'll change the election in the terms of we'll have people vote. And they went to the courts, and the court said, nope, you got to conduct the election, and 40 people died. More than 40 people died. Okay, this pandemic is, bigger than what we've dealt with, and but we still got to remember the voice of the people. The voice of the people. The actual, like I said, the vote totals it worked. So I don't think we should take away that ability to suggest people can vote by mail. There's language in here that says the auditor would have to use the last four digits of their social security number and their voter ID. A lot of folks that could disenfranchise them. So I mean, there's a longer list. Here it is on the floor. Right here. There's my notes. So. I want to talk about these results here some more. Let's look at these. For U.S. Congress, there's more Republicans that voted than Democrats for the early vote statewide, or I mean in the congressional districts. District 4, there was 62,000 Republicans, 43,000 Democrats that had requested, sent, and received. So it was very high participation, and it was actually record high. I know that in Lynn County, I talked to my auditor. In Lynn County, he's got data going back to 1980, and so since 1980 to the present, the highest that we've ever had was 1994, and we've exceeded that. So what I'm saying is the process, because of the pandemic, and voting by mail, encouraging voting by mail, it's not something that always favors Democrats or always favors Republicans. We saw great voter turnout, and the Republicans had massive turnouts, and they should be successful, and they should, not be saying, hey, let's not allow our chief election officer to do that. And actually, what happened was in my household, I got a request form from Secretary of State. I got one from the county as well. This language in this 30-page amendment has an impact on that as well. The page 2. We got what, 30 pages? So natural disaster. I question what if we have, if you can't do this except for within 21 days of an election, what happens next? In 9/11, 2001, New York City, that was an election day, and they had to make some adjustments there. So there are times when you need to do that, and you can't necessarily always plan that's going to be 21 days in advance. This language there's several pages dealing with if an emergency exists in all precincts in the county, the polling places shall not be reduced by more than 35%. There are times when, and I know that just this past Tuesday in Lynn County, we had a consolidated number of polling sites. So with the governor's order saying, please don't travel, but we're starting to open up, but be careful, and the community spread of the deadly disease, we consolidated, our local election officials consolidated some of the polling places, and say it worked. And Democrats didn't win everything, Republicans didn't win everything. It's not about that. It's about people responded and people came out and they voted for it. So, page 4. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, and let's see, actually, I'm skipping to page 8. So, on page 8, if an election contest court finds that there were errors in the conduct of an election that make it impossible to determine the result of the election, contest court shall notify the state commissioner of the finding. State commissioner shall order a repeat of the election. So I'm wondering if in the certain case that this bill contemplates on page 8, section 14, I'm wondering if in fact that there's enough tripper-uppers put in this bill that if they didn't request the form right or they didn't fill out every little detail, the Secretary of State is not allowed to use the most appropriate method. They can't use the voter file to verify if there's an error or an omission. And that, to me, is voter suppression. So there's several, I'll just give you a big picture. It's late at night. But if there's enough tripper-uppers in place here, then somebody's going to say, oh, hey, no, this election can't go because I couldn't get out because of the pandemic and I don't like to vote absentee because, somebody said don't do that. Then you call and question the election. You're taking away the voice of the people. This is voter suppression. So this is frustrating, ladies and gentlemen. I've actually got a lot more material, but, it's 10 o'clock at night, last day of funnel week, so I'll stop there. But I'll just say I'll be happy to answer any questions about any points that I've raised. And, one thing that I don't think we're going to get, although I probably shouldn't ask for it, is that, I'd like to hear the explanation for the bill before we actually talk about it, not just in your closing remarks. But I guess that's probably what we'll see tonight on this bill that was determined to be germane, even though it's really not germane, but that's the power of the majority. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chair. But this is nothing more than voter suppression, a voter suppression bill, and it hurts Republicans, buddy, ma'am, and Democrats. Because you guys are the big winners. You got all the votes. And so I'm not saying, oh, you got to do it this way because if you don't, Democrats will win. No, this is about the voice of the people. And I think you're taking away that voice and you're suppressing that voice. And it happens all the time, and I'm going to fight it every time. So thank you.
Any further comments? Senator Jochum, you are in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be very brief. It is getting late, and some of us have a long way to drive to get home yet tonight. But my question is why? Why are we doing this amendment? This amendment takes a two-sentence non-con bill about the design of county seals and replaces it with a voter suppression amendment, a 30-page voter suppression amendment. Why? Why do we think it's a good idea to require a voter ID before a voter can even get a mail ballot? Why do we think it's a good idea to say that if someone misses voting in one general election, they're going to go into the inactive voter file? Why do we think it's a good idea to prohibit the Secretary of State and our county auditors from mailing out requests for absentee ballots unless there's a written request from the voter? Why? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? That more people in this state might engage in a constitutional right to cast a vote? If this last primary showed us anything, it's that it worked. Giving people an opportunity that was very easy to get an absentee ballot and cast their vote in this primary resulted in a record turnout, the highest voter turnout this state has ever had in a primary election, ever, in the history of our state. 522,207 Iowans voted. 411,000 of those 522,000 votes were done by mail ballot. 232,000 Democrats, 177,000 Republican. We had more civic engagement in this primary election than ever. Why would we pass legislation that is going to make it even more difficult from this day forward? My only question is, what are you afraid of? Vote no.
Further discussion, Senator Meeks. Senator Miller Meeks, you're in order.
Thank you very much. I was contacted by a woman in our congressional district who had contacted me, and when the absentee ballot requests were mailed to the home, she received 2 absentee ballot requests for her college-age children who have not lived at home for 20 years. So that may be one answer to your question. I think it's challenging to make the assumption that because the Secretary of State mailed out absentee ballot requests, that explains the turnout. And so in the military, we had a saying, you'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission, so you'll indulge me because it's 10 o'clock at night. So perhaps on the Republican side in the congressional district, since you pointed us out, Senator Taylor, there was record Republican turnout because people weren't at work. They were sequestered at home. They weren't taking kids to athletic events or dance events or cultural events. And they were watching TV and reading direct mail that normally they'd toss into the trash can. And it could be because you had congressional candidates who were in very spirited primaries and who were directing people and in video and in direct mail to vote by mail, instructed them how to vote by mail, reached out to them to vote by mail in social media and every other media event. And then maybe it's also because you just had 2 incredible congressional candidates that were running. So thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Celsi, you were up first. Go ahead, you're in order.
Thanks. My colleague, Senator Taylor, took all my good points. Nice job, Taylor. Okay, so I'm going to read you a letter. We've gotten these all day. I've got about 300 in my inbox right now on this subject, all urging me to vote no on this bill because it's a voter suppression bill. To the State Government Committee, my name is Michael Aragon, and I'm a lifelong Iowan and current student at the University of Iowa. When the global pandemic hit, my life was upended. I lost my 2 jobs, my sense of stability, and struggled immensely with the transition to online learning. One thing I didn't struggle with was participating in Iowa's June primary election. In fact, it was one of the best voting experiences that I had had. I did not have to worry about squeezing in time between classes or catching a ride to my polling location. The Iowa Secretary of State took unprecedented measures to ensure voting was safe and accessible by sending out absentee ballot request forms to all registered voters across the state, and turnout was record-breaking. This is really key, everyone. When voting is easy, more people do it. It's pretty simple. Republicans and Democrats alike voted higher rates in states that regularly do vote by mail. Voter fraud is near non-existent. I mean, even President Trump votes by mail. He puts in the wrong address, but he still votes by mail. And it is an extraordinarily difficult to commit time for those seeking to do so. It is not common, not at all. Not uncommon, not at all. Over the last decades, fewer than 50 cases of voter fraud have come up in the state of Iowa over the last 2 decades. I won't, take up too much time here by reading the rest of the letter. The last sentence is, please vote no on Amendment 3926 to HF 2586 or 2486, proposed by Senator Robbie Smith. Respectfully, Michael Aragon. I urge a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion. Senator Giddings, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, I don't want to drag this on any longer. It's after 10 o'clock tonight, but, I'll echo some of the comments of my colleagues here. We've taken a really innocuous bill about county seals, and we've added 30 pages of measures that are going to make it more difficult for folks to vote. We've said that over and over again here. I just want to also bring up the fact that we are facing two monumental challenges as a state and a country right now. We're living through a global pandemic, the likes of which we've never seen in our lifetimes. And people are marching in the streets literally right now because of racial tension in the wake of the George Floyd murder. This bill, if passed, and the measures that are in it, if implemented, will have terrible consequences that are related to both of those things that we are trying to grapple with and deal with right now as a state and a nation. The pandemic is a threat to our public health, obviously. People standing in lines to vote is unsafe. It's more safe for us to vote by mail. We know that. Everybody knows that. As far as the racial tensions go, the marching in the streets, those folks just want to be heard. They want to feel like people treat them equally as the majority of white folks in this country. And here we're passing a law that's going to make it more difficult for people to vote, and it's going to disproportionately impact black and brown people. It's going to make it even more difficult for those folks to vote than it is for you and me. So, again, I don't want to belabor this anymore. I've gotten tons of emails throughout the course of the day today from county auditors and regular citizens that are opposed to this bill. I haven't seen a single person that wants this. So I would ask Senator Smith if he would yield to a question right now.
Senator Smith, will you yield?
Yes, I'll yield.
Senator Smith, I just want to know simply what's the motivation for this bill? Where did it come from, and who wants it? I've received my inbox is lit up today with folks that do not want this bill. Yeah. Who is it that wants it?
Thank you, Senator Giddings. So actually I got just a text message from a constituent saying thank you for protecting voter ID. So I just want to make sure that whoever communicates with you, they communicate you. What people communicate with me, I have. So
that's why I'm asking.
Let's talk about this. First of all, yep. This amendment was given 35 hours ago, and 7 lines were changed. LSA decided to redraft it. They left out 7 lines. That's why you received it this morning. But other than 7 lines, you've had it for 35 hours. Now let's talk about how many months. 3/4 of this amendment has been to the public for 15 months. 3/4 of this 30-page amendment has been publicly disclosed for 15 months. And so when people come in this chamber and they say it was dropped on us this morning, that is a disingenuous statement.
Senator Smith, I didn't ask that question.
Please,
I asked who.
Senator Giddings, please do not interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. Please show me the same respect that I showed you.
I'm asking you a question.
Pardon me, Mr.
I have
Senator
the floor.
Yep.
He asked the floor manager to yield, not to take over the debate. He asked him to yield to the question.
Okay.
Answer the question. We don't need a 15-minute dissertation.
Senator Smith. So I would remind you or anybody else, if you don't like how I answer a question, you don't have to ask me to yield. So I will continue to go.
Okay.
So this amendment has been out here. So why we're doing this? We're doing this because a judge ruled that voter ID law argued that the state has an interest in ensuring the integrity of all elections in the state. That's why we're doing this. I campaigned on voter ID. I ran commercials on voter ID. I sent mailings out on voter ID, and the people had a chance to fire me, and they chose to reelect me. Now, I know you disagree with that, but the voters in my district agreed with me to come down here. I voted for voter ID. And I'm down here fixing voter ID because of a court ruling. The court upheld voter ID.
Okay.
And I hear about voter suppression.
I appreciate your answer. I've heard enough. Thank you. I would like to hear from those people. So maybe you could share, as we continue this debate, I'm assuming this is going to pass tonight. I'd like to hear from some of those constituents who want this bill. We can share hundreds of emails with you that have come into my inbox just today alone, that are opposed to this bill, and county auditors across this state, and the Iowa Association of County Auditors is opposed to it. So it would be wonderful for you to share with us publicly on the floor some of the information that you've gotten from constituents that support this. Okay? So with that, I just urge a no vote, and I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion. Oh, Senator Bisignano, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this has been a trying week. We are late, and I don't care how late it is. I live here. We all know why we left here. Some of us didn't agree to come back now, but we're here. And this is what we face. I'm risking my life. I've watched the protesters be face slammed that we don't care about minority numbers. We don't care how it impacts them. I look at this bill, and I mean, my sheet, this isn't the bill, this is my information sheet. There's a lot to go through here, and a lot will come out on the floor, but I don't understand what happened to this state that is a good state, that is an honest state, that there is barely a shred of any voter fraud. Shred. Show me otherwise. I think the last person I read about that got caught was a Republican, and she had a mental illness because she thought somebody convinced her that we threw away our absentee as Democrats, so she tried to go vote into the booth. I don't know of any other. I don't know of any schemes. I don't know of anything. Now, our president thinks that this country is riddled with crooks, cheats, and knaves. This is Iowa. But you're picking up his theme. You're picking up his theme. Let's just choke down these absentees. You know, let's make it very difficult. And you act like it's not, Senator. Well, we're not reading the same documents and interpreting in the same way. Just something that really sticks out to me here. We even get into illegal signs. Illegal yard signs. But what it says is you can put up signs illegally on public property, but the only person that can come and get it's a law enforcement officer or a public works worker. Well, that's public property. Anybody has the right to take trash, which a sign is on public property, and throw it in the garbage. Anybody has that right. And then it says, well, if it's too late, if we're getting past the deadlines, well, we're going to do a 48-hour whatever certified mail to tell you to go get your... Why don't we build back the campaigns for the cost of law enforcement, public service, of public works, mailing, certification? Where is it that says you, the candidate, pays for it? Not me, the public. You're the crook. You're the one putting signs on public property you know is illegal. Why shouldn't you be charged with that crime? Well, even if it's littering. You don't have any right to do that, and you know it. But this almost says, you know, if the police don't have time and public works is off over the weekend, election's Tuesday, I'll just put signs all over every public spot in this city. And I've seen it in Des Moines. So I don't understand, as my colleague Senator Jochum said, we started with almost a blank piece of paper. And I got to say, and this is no personal offense to you, Senator Johnson, by any means, but by ruling this amendment germane is probably the biggest abuse of power that the Republican Party has done in the Iowa Senate since you got here. You know what the rules are, but that's abuse of power because you can. If this was taken to an objective board, they'd laugh you out. But it's germane. Germane to almost a blank piece of paper. Treasure symbol. Likeness. Does that sound like 30 pages of you better do this and you better do that and you're going to not be able to vote? We're going to take you off the voting rolls in a year? Does that bill say that? I think not. But it's germane to that bill. That is the worst abuse of power I've seen in this Senate. Shame on you. Little by little, you degrade this place with those kinds of rulings. I understand close rulings. I understand partisan rulings. I don't understand that ruling. And I'm angry. And I'm angry that I'm here now on a Friday night during a pandemic, doing stupid bills we've been doing all day. And we end with the worst of all, the potpourri that's been trying to get through this place for years. And we did it with an abuse of power to get it done. So I hope you're happy. And we're here wasting our time, and I'll bet this doesn't see the light of day in the House. Senator Jochum's got to drive 4 hours to Dubuque. Many of you got to drive almost as far or farther. Now, is this worth being here tonight to debate this on a Friday night during a pandemic? No, it's not. No, it's not. I'd rather come to work tomorrow, invite the protesters and the people that don't want it, sit in that gallery, and see how we function here. Because shame on the white people. So I'm not going to support this, ever. But I sure think that the abuse that went down with that ruling is beyond the pale. I ask you to oppose House File 2486.
Very good. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Senator Smith? Yes. I'm sorry you can't. Do I have unanimous
Objection.
consent? Objection?
Please come to the well.
Okay. Senator Smith. Senator Smith, you're in order for closing comments on
Point of order.
the
Point of order.
point of order has been called. Senator Smith.
Can we have respect in this chamber for the Senate chamber?
Senator Smith, you're in order for closing comments. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you. I was reminded if everyone would please have respect in the Senate chamber. It is the people's chamber. So now, Senator Smith, you are in order for closing comments on Amendment 4071.
I move Amendment 4071.
Senator Smith moves Amendment 4071 as amended to House File 2046. How would you like to vote?
Roll call.
Roll call vote's been called for. Clerk?
Senator Smith,
Aye.
Senator Johnson, Senator Bisignano,
No.
Senator Celsi, Senator Chapman,
Aye.
Senator Knoyer, Senator Feenstra, Senator Giddings, Senator Jochum, Senator Miller Meeks, Senator Rosenboom, Senator Schultz, Senator T. Taylor, Senator Whiting, Senator Zahn, ten to 5. It has passed.
Okay, Amendment 4071 as amended to House File 2486 passes 10 to 5.
Discussion on the bill.
Further discussion on the bill, House File 2486.
How long should I take?
They're not going to discuss it.
Let's see, no discussion on the bill. Senator Smith, your reporter
Yep.
for...
Closing.
Okay, vote on the bill.
Closing.
Closing comments, Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we're in the committee meeting. We're in the Senate chamber. I appreciate the debate that we have here. Keep in mind that in this bill, we have a chance for people to count their votes, have their votes counted if they forget to sign an absentee ballot. Current law is Tuesday of election. This extends it to the Monday. An extra week to count votes. But yet I hear that this is a voter suppression bill. So more people's votes will count on this. We are protecting polls so that people can go to the polls and be able to vote. But yet this is called voter suppression. But we're actually wanting to keep more polls open so people have a chance to go and vote at a number of locations versus traveling a long ways to vote. And during debate, it was asked of, show me the emails. The support for this, fixing voter ID, was the support that was given to me in my last election. When I ran on voter ID, and the people in my district had a chance to fire me, and they chose to rehire me. And you may not like the fact that they rehired me, but they did. And I know, and many of you were in my district, you should know that I ran commercials on it. I mean, there was almost half of you that were in my district. You should know this. My constituents support voter ID, or else I wouldn't be here. Every single Republican senator that turned in their nomination papers won re-election. And they all voted for voter ID. If the people back home thought we were suppressing the vote, they would not elect us back here. That's very strong statement versus emails. And I heard this same line of voter suppression when I ran the voter ID bill, and they said less people will vote, and it was record turnout. So I guess what I'm doing is actually helping turnout. You should want me to pass more of this election bill. And let's talk about the auditors. So you receive emails from auditors? Well, I wouldn't take everything an auditor says, because I have an auditor that says it's going to take over an average of an hour to vote if voter IDs pass. That's what it said in the newspaper. It'd take over an hour on average. So I put my auditor to the test. I showed up 5 o'clock hour on election day, the busiest time. I received my ballot in less than 4 minutes. But my county auditor went to the newspaper and said, oh, it's going to take an average of an hour to vote. So I want you to know that story before you read your county auditor emails. The state has an interest in ensuring the integrity of all elections in this state. The judge ruled. You can say whatever you want in this chamber. You can storm out of this chamber. You have every right to do that. And any senator can speak on this bill on the floor, and let's see if we're going to have debate on the floor. We didn't last time we had an election bill. I'll be curious if we're going to have a debate on it. I welcome the debate. I can defend this until the cows come home. And the people of my district elected me to come down here and work on voter ID. And to sit there and say that I suppress the vote is wrong. And the facts are behind me, not emotion. Facts. I passed legislation here so more people can vote. 17-and-a-half-year-olds can vote in primaries. And that was the first time this year this happened. Because of my bill, 17-and-a-half-year-olds can vote. But yet I'm called a vote suppressor. I put in a voter ID bill that if someone forgets their ballot or forgets their ID, someone with them can attest for them. But I'm called a vote suppressor. If someone shows up and they don't have their ID and nobody's with them, they can fill out a provisional ballot. But I'm a vote suppressor. I put those things in the bill so people could vote. Because I want to protect the ballot box. And there is voter fraud in Iowa. I have stood on this floor. I have certified letters. We have criminals that have committed this. This is a good bill. This is safe and secure and reliable elections. And if you don't like what's coming through here, please vote no. But if you're for safe, secure, and reliable elections, and you want people to have their vote counted that forget to sign their absentee ballot and they have an extra week, vote yes. If you don't want them to be counted, vote no. It's that simple. If you want polls to be open more, location-wise, vote yes. This is a good bill. I move House File 2486 with committee amendment. Record.
Senator Smith.
Aye.
Senator Johnson. Aye. Senator Bisignano. No. Senator Celsi. No. Senator Chapman. Aye. Senator Knoyer. Aye. Senator. I'm sorry. Senator Giddings. Senator Jochum? No. Senator Miller-Meeks? Yes. Senator Rosenboom? Senator Schultz? Aye. Senator T. Taylor? No. Senator Whiting? Yes. Senator Zahn?